Temples and mosques, gurdwaras and churches have long been centers of religion. They've also represented the many strands of culture that Indians have woven together to make a nation. In fact, the spiritual quest of Indians has been a unifying theme in our civilization. The best representative of this civilization is no warrior or ruler, but a simple mendicant, Gautam Buddha, who travelled far and long till he found enlightenment. That spiritual journey continues even today.
It is the spiritual quest which has been the characterizing feature of Indian history. It is another matter that often it has expressed itself in the form of organized religion. The fact is that religion is one thing and spirituality another. Nevertheless, it is the Indian pilgrim of different religious persuasions traveling from place to place who have formed the backbone of Indian history. And it is the pilgrim's progress which in a way is Indian history itself.
The Indus Valley or the Harappan culture is the oldest civilization for which we have archaeological evidence. Excavations have revealed a great deal about the Harappans' daily lives and religious practices. For example, we know that they worshipped a mother goddess. But other details of their religious beliefs can only be established if the Harappan script is finally deciphered and relevant inscriptions and other evidence are discovered. Until then, historians can only make guesses based on anthropological observations. They can look at the religious and other practices of present-day societies and seek to understand the distant past in that light. For instance, they can speculate that the Harappans worshipped elements of nature, just as their much later descendants continue to do even now. Hence, the worship of trees until today might be derived from prehistoric practices. And there may well be a continuity between the Indus bull depicted on Harappan seals and the venerated bulls that roam around freely today. Similarly, the worship of snakes has a long antiquity. Among the oldest Nag temples is the Maniyar Mutt in Rajgir, dating to a period well before history started being recorded in India.
तो जरासंध के ऊपर जब किसी प्रकार की विपत्ति आने की संभावना होता था तो अपने हितैषियों प्रजाओं के साथ यहाँ नाग की मनसा पूजा करता था। नाग तो खुश होकर नगरवासियों की स्वयं रखवाली करती थी। सामने 3 कुआं है जिसके बारे में वर्णित है कि एक में दूध, एक में घी और एक में हवन करने का सामान रखा जाता था। उसके बगल में हवन कुंड है जिसमें कि हवन दिया जाता था।
Throughout history, the fear and veneration of Nags, also the generic name for tribals, has found many forms. There is a widespread view that the Harappan civilization disappeared and left practically no traces of its spiritual content. However, the continuation of the worship of the Mother Goddess in various forms shows that elements of that culture live on. In fact, there is mention in Vedic literature of the interaction between the Aryan rishis and non-Aryan munis, or the silent ones who were hermits. This too indicates that a number of priests or spiritual leaders of the Harappans continued to exercise influence on later cultures. It is likely, as Kosambi has argued, that some of the Brahmin Gotras might be the descendants of non-Aryan ancestors, and some of their ritual practices might be derived from the pre-Vedic age. Veneration of the sun, the wind and waters, and the joyous celebration of life were all part of the Rig-Vedic law, which has both spiritual and historical elements. However, centuries later, spiritualists and commentators like Sri Aurobindo resented the interpretation of the Rig-Veda as a historical text. He argued that just because the people who composed it were essentially pastoralists, we cannot conclude that the Rig-Veda was a treatise on animal husbandry. The fact is that the Vedas also give a great deal of insight into secular life and not just religion. Among the more important Rig-Vedic gods is Indra. He is described as having freed the waters. Kosambi somewhat prosaically interpreted this as the destruction of the dams which sustained the agriculture of the Harappans. Given his role in determining the manner in which agriculture could be carried out, Indra was adopted as the god of the rains. This made him a VIP among the deities in a land dependent on the monsoons. In the Rig-Veda itself, Indra also makes his appearance as Purandar, the destroyer of forts, perhaps those of the Harappans. He is a warrior hero, fond of feasting and drinking. He is often represented in sculptures, like this one at Ellora, as full-bellied. One hymn of the Rig-Veda presents the drunken Indra, bragging in his cups. Like wild winds the draughts have raised me up. Have I been drinking som? I'll pick up the earth and put it here or put it there. Have I been drinking som? Thousands of years after the original rites connected with the drinking of som, the Vedic Som Yagya is still sought to be replicated today. This reminds us that som itself, an intoxicating drink of unknown composition, was raised to the level of a deity in the Vedas. There were other Vedic gods too. Surya, the common word for sun, came to be represented centuries later through this sculpture in the magnificent Konark temple. The temple is conceived as a chariot carrying the sun god across the sky. The awe that the fire god Agni must have inspired in the Vedic age itself can still be traced in the use of fire in various Hindu rituals. In the Rig-Veda, Varun was ethically the highest, but Yam, the lord of the dead, was the most feared god. The most serene was Usha, the goddess of dawn. Some of the best-known verses of the Rig Veda were recited in her praise. Post-Rig Vedic society produced a large body of philosophical texts. These were composed in the serenity of the forests and are therefore, until today, known as the Aranyaks and the Upanishads. The Upanishads were deeply concerned about being and spoke of an abstract supreme being called Brahma and an equally abstract individual being called Atma. From the Vedas to the Upanishads, there is a move away from ritualism and towards spirituality and ethics. These concepts are explained with great sophistication through allegories.
The concept of the Atma is explained by the Chandogya Upanishad through an allegory. The teacher asks the student, "Do you see the tree?" "Yes, sir." "Is it big?" "Yes, sir." "Do you see the fruit of the tree?" "Yes, sir." "How big is it?" "It's small." "Will you get me a fruit of the tree?" "Yes." "Now split the fruit." "Yes." "What do you see?" "Very tiny seeds." "Now split the seed." "Yes." "What do you see now?" "Nothing." Well, in that nothingness lies the essence of the tree. It is that nothingness which is the essence of the soul, of the Atma. In that nothingness lies you, Shvetketu.
Seeing the squalor in religious centers like Varanasi today, it's worth remembering that centuries ago the Upanishads also discussed social ethics through parables. Much as a child may ask today, a young boy Satyakam asked his mother Jabala what his family was. She replied that she had no idea because he was born when she travelled about as a servant. All she knew were her own name and the name she'd given him. So she said he could be called Satyakam Jabala. The boy went to a respected teacher and said that he wanted to be his student. Upon being asked about his family background, Satyakam told him his mother's story and said his name was Satyakam Jabala. The master was impressed. Recognizing the boy's honesty, the guru declared that though he did not know who his father was, Satyakam was a true Brahmin. There was apparently still some flexibility in those early days. Later, Varna and Jati were to get fossilized into a rigid and oppressive caste system. Today, even the Jains are practically a caste in Hindu society. Their worship is also so ritualized that it doesn't do justice to the abstract, sophisticated systems which were evolved by the Tirthankars. The Jains created an epistemology of great subtlety. For example, there was Syadvad, the theory of maybe, which is a kind of uncertainty principle. There was also Anikantvad, a remarkable theory of space and time suggesting relativity. Although it's not evident from the breathtaking architecture of the famous Dilwara temple at Mount Abu, Jainism is fundamentally atheistic. It doesn't deny the existence of the gods, but it refuses them any important part in the universal scheme of things. The world for the Jain is not created or maintained by a personal deity, but functions only according to universal law. The last Tirthankar, Mahavir, who left the mortal coil at Pawapuri, where this beautiful temple stands today, expressed Jain morality through simple but beautiful metaphors. Take this verse spoken by him to a disciple named Gautam. As the dead leaf when its time is up, falls from the tree to the ground, so is the life of man. Gautam, always be watchful. So cast away all attachments and be as pure as a lotus or as water in autumn. Free from every attachment, Gautam, always be watchful. We owe much to the Jain monk's love of literature. To copy a manuscript was considered a work of great religious merit. This applied even to the copying of secular texts. Hence the old Jain monasteries of Western India have preserved many rare and otherwise unknown texts, including many which are of non-Jain origin. Siddhartha Gautam, a contemporary of Mahavir the Jain, attained enlightenment and became the Buddha at Bodh Gaya. The Mahabodhi temple stands at that site. There's a curious painting at Ajanta which shows the Buddha preaching to a group. Some of the people are shown wearing typically Persian clothes and headgear of a distinctly later period. But even this anachronism doesn't appear odd, since the basic doctrine of Buddhism itself is timeless. The doctrine revolves around desire. Dukkha or sorrow stems from the unfulfillment of desire, and it's this sorrow that has to be overcome. Dukkha is inherent in ordinary life. It's due to craving for individual satisfaction. It can only be stopped by stopping that craving. And this can only be done by taking a middle course and leading a moral and well-ordered life. The Tathagat said, as the ocean has only one flavor, that of salt, so my doctrine has only one flavor, the flavor of emancipation from sorrow. Buddhist monks practiced various austerities, but the Buddha himself taught that emancipation is to be achieved through the eightfold middle path between self-indulgence and self-mortification. The Buddhist doctrine is known as Paticca Samuppada, the chains of dependent origination. It outlines the chain of dependence that ties humans down to this world, much like the motion of one wheel leads to the rotation of others geared to it. From ignorance arises imagination, and from that comes self-consciousness, which develops the six senses, including thought. The sense of contact gives rise to feeling or emotion, and therefore to craving and attachment. It's craving which requires becoming and rebirth. This cycle of sentiment and thought, therefore, has to be broken in order to be free from sorrow. Siddhartha Gautam broke the cycle when he attained Nirvana and became the Buddha. He preached for many years after that and attained Parinirvana at Kushinagar. This stoop marks the spot of the Master's departure from earth. His doctrine was interpreted in many ways by the different Buddhist schools which developed later. Simple stoops without idols characterize the austere Heenyan sect. This school is known as the lesser vehicle, and it reflects the philosophy of an abstract universe, constantly in flux. The existence of God or an immortal soul that controls the universe is not of primary importance for the Heenyan doctrine. Another Buddhist sect takes the form of Lamaism, which is a variant of Mahayana, the greater vehicle. There's much more ritual and ceremony here. However, rituals were new elements that were incorporated into the Buddhist doctrine as it came into contact with other cults.
Yam, Shum, Pum, Am, Mem, Barim, Im, Mim, Ram, Rim, Tum.
The Mahayana too is not only about rites and rituals. It's seen as the massive cart which can carry all to salvation. It has a great element of compassion and devotion. In this respect, it's a precursor of bhakti, in which love is enough to unite the devotee and God, the object of devotion. In the Mahayana school, the Buddha was made into a supernatural entity, and his nirvana was interpreted as a culmination of various lives, those of the bodhisattvas. The Ajanta caves have a beautiful depiction of one of the bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshwar or Padmapani. The bodhisattvas embodied all the ideal qualities that the Buddha preached to all human beings. Though much of the original teachings changed over time, the core of the ideas like compassion and charity were retained in full measure. Buddhism also influenced the development of an abstract philosophy of Advaita. It's best known through the discourses of Adi Shankara. His legacy lives on in several monastic orders like this one at Kanchi. The school of thought which Shankara propounded is known as Vedanta. Vedanta is still a living school, and modern theologians and mystical teachers like Vivekananda and Aurobindo Ghosh were all Vedantists. The doctrines of Vedanta were based on the Upanishads. They gave logical and organized form to their many mystical speculations, much as a weaver does to a ball of silk thread. For Shankara, all Vedic literature was sacred. However, to harmonize its many paradoxes, he adopted an expedient already known in Buddhism, that of two levels of truth. At the everyday level, the world is produced by Brahma and goes through an evolutionary process. But on the highest level of truth, the whole phenomenal universe and the gods too are unreal. The world is Maya. Ultimately, the only reality is Brahma, the impersonal, universal soul of the Upanishads, with which the individual soul, the Atma, is identical. As in the Upanishads, salvation is to be obtained by recognition of this identity through meditation. Shankara started his journey from this place in Kerala and founded a monastic order which mimicked that of the Buddhists. His idea of Brahma did not really differ from the nirvana of Mahayana Buddhism. In a way, Buddhism represents the middle path between the highly abstract Advait, based on austere meditation, and the Dvait, which took the form of bhakti. The direct relationship between the individual and the deity was the basis of the bhakti traditions. The Nirguna thought is based on the idea of an abstract and formless deity. By contrast, Sagun thought represents God in human form. Sikhism too was a Nirgun philosophy. It places great emphasis on the word rather than the form. The Golden Temple at Amritsar, the holiest shrine for all Sikhs, contains no idols but is a living testimony to collective belief in the Nirguna idea. Compared to the collectivity of the Sikhs, the Sagun Bhakti tradition emphasizes the individual's relationship with God. Perhaps the best expression of this humanized spirituality was in the songs of Mirabai. Mirabai's temple still stands within the grand Chittor fort. The meek and the oppressed still derive solace here. After centuries of travel, the spiritual pilgrimage continues.